Hey everyone, I hope you've had a great day so far and that you're doing well. For this video we'll be going through an unboxing and review of Studio Series Voyager class Thrust. And Thrust, arguably, if he even appeared, it's hard to say. But Thrust is out of the Transformers Bumblebee live action movie, at least this version is. And this particular version of the Thrust toy was released back in 2022. Now, because it had some distribution issues here in Australia, which is ironic because it's now popping up, I did get this from Hobbylink Japan back in the day, and it's actually still in stock. So I'll have a link to Thrust in the description in the event that people actually want to get a copy of Thrust and missed out. Because I don't expect Thrust to actually be appearing everywhere, and Australia just might be very, very lucky that we're getting some of these 2022 releases coming in. Now, on to Thrust. Hopefully I'll keep this relatively quick because he's basically a minor remodel and basically a redeco of Starscream and Thundercracker. And a little bit of Ramjet. Blitzwing. Blitzwing. I'll keep calling him Ramjet because it looks like a Ramjet. Anyway, front of the box for Thrust. So we have a nice shot of the computer art of Thrust here. Still looks like the other Seekers, except he does have a little bit of changes to align to him being more of the quote-unquote conehead side of the squad. And then we have a nice view of Thrust in the packaging back in the day when plastic was still a thing. Now, even though this is more the pure Takara Tomy of Japan release, with the exception of the text, you would be very hard pressed to actually tell a difference between a Hasbro release and a Takara Tomy. Side of the box, other side of the box, back of the box. So we do have a shot of Thrust between his robot mode and his Cybertronian Tetra Jet mode. I think it's around 30 odd steps, give or take. I can't remember now. Which is funny because I only did Thundercracker a little while ago. Probably turns out it was 2 months. But there you go. So it is nice to see that. The alt mode is going to be the same as Starscream, Thundercracker. I don't expect too much variation there, and other than the colors, I think the only major change on Thrust is just this little section behind his head to create a bit of that parallel to the cone heads. So that was the box. Time to get Thrust out, have a better look. And with everything out of the packaging, what do we get? So we get one loose accessory, although technically there is 3 because the other 2 are already attached to his wings. We do get Thrust, we do get a manual, and off screen right now is the backdrop. So just put the weapon and the manual aside. Thrust, I'll just stand you up and put you to the side. Backdrop, which we're getting pretty used to seeing. I've only seen this, I lost track how many times we've seen this backdrop, but I've seen it enough. And then in terms of Thrust, granted, this is not the most ideal way of displaying the backdrop, but that's a quick idea of Thrust in front of his backdrop. Definitely not too bad, but at the same time, also getting very used to seeing this backdrop. That was the included backdrop. If you've been collecting all the Transformers Bumblebee Studio Series, you probably have about, I was going to say 6, but that's probably a slight exaggeration. You probably have about 3, maybe 4 copies of that backdrop. So putting Thrust back there momentarily. Before we look at you, Thrust and your accessory. Manual. So this will be Takara Tomy version of the manual as opposed to the Hasbro version. So I do like how right off the bat there are some quick pointers just to tell you how to properly have them transform straight out of the box. At least that's how I feel it is. And then starting on the steps from step number 1, won't go through this too much because we've pretty much transformed this particular mold a few different times, and the steps are pretty much the same. Now, it is interesting having a look at the manual from a Takara Tomy perspective. It does feel like it's a little bit more easier to follow, given a recent grievance I had with the Studio Series Gamer Edition Bumblebee, where the instructions, I mean, you could tell what the instructions were trying to suggest, but they obviously didn't do it well enough. But that's okay, these things do happen. That's the manual. I'll probably still have it later because I don't exactly remember the full transformation process. As for its accessory, so we've seen this weapon plenty of times before. We're just seeing it with a spot of olive green, forest green, I'm not sure what type of green. Green is green. And then that will equip into his hand like so, which we've once again seen plenty of times through Starscream and Thundercracker. And there we go. Definitely not too bad. So that's using that particular accessory. If we use one of these, which once again, still pretty much exactly the same from previous iterations. Just popped off the side, put it into the hand like so. Becomes a small little handgun. And obviously you can put it back up there. Okay, as for you, Thrust, so I do know you can actually stand on your own 2 feet. Just in case people don't believe me, this is you standing on your own 2 feet, unaided. In terms of Thrust, what do you look like? So you still have that very light greyish theme, but now you're sporting some type of green. Did I say light green? So light grey with a green theme, but there's a few different shades of green. There's a light green, maybe more of a camo forest green. So at least 2 shades of green, which actually doesn't look too bad. Otherwise, you've got your metallic darker greys, this lighter grey for your main fuselage and things like that. Bit of the black as well. Overall, color-wise, you're definitely not too bad, and you do show up quite nicely on camera. Also, there's this little bit of yellow. Otherwise, you're pretty much in the same mold classing that we've seen. So, Thrust from the front. The side, not that it's doing very well. Thrust from the back. Once again, I still don't know why. I just like that profile. Whoops. Bang the camera stand because that's always a great idea. I've always liked this. I'm going to do it this way. This look from the back because it just has that real telltale signs of the original G1 Seekers. The other side, and back to the front again, and a quick look at some of the detailing. So visually, from what I can tell, the only real difference is this little head enclosure, which does appear to be built into the mold. So this is probably the design way of saying, here, have a cone head, without necessarily changing his head per se, but it's actually not too bad as a live action depiction of the cone head, which is very, very cool. Now, as for articulation, his head is actually now completely immobile. So the downside about this new part that's been added in, you can't actually freely move his head, not with any relative ease. So I think that's actually a bit of a disappointment by losing some of that, because from a posing perspective, you actually will now have limitation as to what direction your head is now looking. So it's almost like he's going to be forever looking out this particular way. The rest of the articulation is pretty much exactly the same as Starscream and Thundercracker. I'm actually not going to go through the articulation. I will have links to Starscream and Thundercracker somewhere from in this video, probably as cards. if you want to know a bit more. But obviously the arms have a good amount of it. The legs actually weren't too bad, and this copy of Thrust actually isn't loose limbed like I think my Starscream was the loose limbed one. So everything is actually pretty good and useful. So definitely a good degree of articulation for a Voyager. It's just unfortunate the head has now lost articulation to gain that thematic cone head look. Otherwise everything else is the same. I definitely won't spend too much more time on that because we'll just be reiterating things that have been iterated before. So now that we've done that side of Thrust, I will transform Thrust. We'll have a very quick look at how his Tetrajet looks with this particular colour scheme. Then I'll do some very brief final thoughts and wrap it up. And with Thrust now in his vehicle mode, after a while that actually does get quite easy to do some of these Cybertronian Tetrajets, which is very cool because I remember because of Starscream I was absolutely loathing the actual transformation. Now, as for the actual Cybertronian jet mode itself, from the top, the bottom, which we're getting pretty used to seeing, the side, the back, the other side, and the front, and a bit of a front angle. In fact, I might even do Thrust like that. So what's really changed in his jet mode within the mold, so between Starscream and Thundercracker, other than the color, nothing else. Transformation is exactly the same despite the small change to accommodate the cone looking backing behind his head, and even then that has no prominent look or feature within the alt mode. So really the alt mode is exactly the same as Starscream and Thundercracker. So definitely won't go too much further than that, other than feel free to go back at some of the previous videos because there is no actual change other than the colors. Transformation, once again, exactly the same. The inclusion of the cone backing, no consequence whatsoever. So final thoughts on Studio Series Voyager class Thrust. Thrust, being any form of the cone head / seekers, fundamentally is just a character recolor, and that's persisted since G1. So I think everyone is well and truly across the fact that any of the seekers, you know, it's the same mold, but you're basically getting it for the color variations. Now, it is very cool that the live action movie did try to expand out to some of the other characters. So it is nice that we got Starscream, Thundercracker, and Thrust. Have no idea if we'll ever see a Skywarp. Have no idea if we'll ever see a Dirge. And will we ever see a quote-unquote Ramjet? Who knows? I still think Blitzwing should have been Ramjet, but I also feel I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who thinks that, so I'm almost inclined to say we're just missing Dirge, even though quote-unquote Ramjet is technically an Earth-based mode, not an actual Cybertronian one, but them's the breaks. As a general completionist, I would say feel free to try and grab Thrust if you can find him. Anyone who particularly likes the character of Thrust, and there's been many iterations of Thrust throughout many series, feel free to grab him. Now for me, other than being a general completionist, I mean, he is still one of the overarching Seekers and the Decepticon plane jet, so it's hard to say no, because if you started early enough, part of the collection novelty is to attempt to gain a full collection of Seekers. And I think the only time I managed to do that was through the Classics line, where I got the first 3 Seekers, Thundercracker, Starscream, Skywarp, and was able to get Ramjet, Thrust, and Dirge. I won't go into the other ones because I know Sunstorm and a few others came out over the years and gained a bit of notoriety. I'm more thinking the original 6th per G1. Similar to that, you know, people obviously try and get full collections of Dinobots and things like that. So there's a few subgroups where you just want to try and get all of them. This is no different. If you're not a huge fan of the Decepticons, Decepticon Jets, Thrust, or anything, then personal preference will come into play. And I will leave that there for the unboxing and review of Thrust, because fundamentally he's just a recolor. But it's very nice to finally have him, and at least that's 3.5 of the Decepticon Jets covered for Transformers Bumblebee. So yes, definitely quite liking having him, and you know, both the robot mode and the alt mode. I mean, it has definitely grown on me over time. Similar with the transformation. The transformation is actually getting a lot easier the more and more I've done it. So I'm definitely thankful for that. Thank you very much for watching this quick unboxing and review video. Feel free to leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel, and I do greatly appreciate it. Extra content can also be found on my Instagram account. Link is in the description below. Otherwise, it's still the same name as the channel. I'll also include a link to Thrust at HobbyLink Japan for those who are actually trying to finish a Studio Series collection and weren't able to pick up a copy of Thrust. When I last looked, which was literally moments before doing this video, he is still in stock. So, take it as you will. Stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video. See ya.